Welcome to the Spiritual Geek Podcast, Wisdom for Modern Times, where we focus on living with intention to consciously create a life you love and celebrate. I'm your host, Sheila Franzen, and I'm so excited to share another episode with you. Today, Brad has joined me for a conversation about Orgonite. Brad's a spiritual seeker dedicated to the ascension journey. As a student of metaphysical energy and alchemy, he's drawn to creating energy devices such as Orgonite and facilitating energy healing sessions together with his higher self. Welcome, Brad. Is there anything else you would like to share as part of your introduction?
Well, thank you for having me. It's definitely a pleasure to be here. And Orgonite's something that I'm really passionate about. As far as sharing with my introduction, no, I think you summed it up perfectly there. That's definitely what I'm into and what I'm passionate about doing and sharing with the world.
Well, thank you. So speaking of passion about Orgonite, where does a passion for Orgonite come from? How did that get created for you? How did you learn about Orgonite?
I can't remember exactly how I stumbled across it. I do remember going to, I don't know if this is the first time that I came across Orgonite, but it's definitely what sticks out in my mind. I remember going to local psychic fairs. You know, they had their tables set up with different vendors and stuff. And there was a guy there selling Orgonite, pyramids, little pendants, plates, like a charging plate, that is. And that, like I said, that's what sticks out in my mind as my first introduction to it. I felt really drawn to it. The work he did was very nice and beautiful. So I got a pendant, and I could definitely feel, like, right off the bat, from wearing it and putting it on, I could feel something emanating from the pendant. I could feel a change taking place in the energy around me and, like, my own energy. And it just was something I was drawn to. And then sometime later, I just kept getting more and more drawn to it. And I decided that I wanted to start making it. And that's exactly what I did. Sometime later, however many, let's say years later, I ended up making some of my own. And then the hobby kind of got put down for a bit. And then when I had moved and was living where I am now currently, the passion had come back. And it was always there, but I just never pursued it. And then I started acquiring items, learning more about it, researching it more, and just one day just picked it up, and I've been running with it ever since.
That is part of the fun when we find those things that are literally like a spark. I sure remember the first time I saw Orgonite. I was at a local fair, similar. It was kind of the weekly, almost like farmers market type fair in Grass Valley, California, where I was staying for a period of time. And that was 15 years ago.
Okay.
And I walked by this gentleman's booth and I'm like, what is that stuff? And so, I think I walked away with 2 pyramids, a charging plate, a pendant. I was like, oh my gosh, this stuff is so, one, it was just beautiful because I was already in love with crystals at that point in my life. And then it feels good. And then you get into the depth of some of the things that Orgonite can help you with. I was just fascinated by the energetic constructs and all the things around it. Like, I think I was originally drawn to it from all the EMF stuff. I had been doing a lot of research around EMF protection at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Orgonite's a much more beautiful way to manage some of that EMF protection from TVs and computers and those electromagnetic frequencies that are everywhere in our home. And I wore a pendant all the time. I bought one for everybody I knew at the time. My mom, who knew nothing about energy, even wore it. I still have the one that I had given her. She's crossed over now. But she, not understanding it even, enjoyed wearing it, right? Because it was something unique and fun and different. What do you like? I'm always curious about this concept of, how does it really protect us from EMF and the electromagnetic frequencies? Have you looked into that?
Absolutely. And there's definitely all kinds of searches people can do to look into that deeper. And I find with my own experience and listening to various people that make their own and the information they bring forward, I tend to look at it like a filter. So it's not so much like a shield that would protect you. It's more like you can still look at it as a shield for sure, but I prefer to look at it as a filter. So it draws in whatever low vibrational frequencies or energies that are in the vicinity of the Orgonite, let's say a pyramid, for example. And it, due to the piezoelectrical effect of the quartz crystals and other piezoelectrical crystals that are inside of it, as well as the forms of metals that may be in, which there's a large variety you can use, it transmutes that energy and then releases it back out to the environment that it's in. Let's say a living room, for example, or a bedroom, and it's purifying the energy. And by doing so, it's then it's like, think of it like an air filter. You're cleaning the air in your house, so you're cleaning the energies in your house or your room or your bedroom, your living room, wherever it may be. And I feel it's the same with say a pendant. So if you're wearing a necklace, I kind of look at it like us human beings. It's kind of like in a video game or something. You place a pendant on, you're now wearing a pendant of strength, and that imbues you with strength. So it's kind of like the same thing with Orgonite. You put the pendant on your person, and then it now has a direct effect on your person and your energetic field around you, purifying your own energetic field, your own auric field, and helping to clean out any kind of lower vibrational energies and raise that energy to a higher state.
I love that. I never thought, I mean, like, I know Orgone, the concept of Orgone is really it's a channeler of energy in its own way. And so
Yes.
The concept of thinking about it as a filter when I have pyramids, like I've always intuitively, when I move into a new place or, the energy's kind of been disrupted in the home, I'll find myself going and grabbing a pyramid and putting it in a room or moving, like when we moved into our home, I'd move it around room by room.
Yeah.
And, and there I think it was creating a filter. It was creating alignment. It was creating clearing.
Sure.
And
pyramids themselves, like whether it's a crystal pyramid or Organite pyramid, the shape of the pyramid itself has such a beneficial effect on the person or the room that it's in. So now you combine that with Organite and the properties of Organite. It's kind of, you're getting more bang for your buck for sure.
We can always use more bang for our buck.
Absolutely.
And so the word that was popping into my head when you were saying bang for your buck was the tower busting. And the concepts people might have heard around Organite as tower busters.
Yeah.
And I know that was started with really this focus of the cell phone towers, right? Creating tower busters that were minimizing some of the negative energy around cell phone towers. Are people still doing that? Like, do people still go out and put Organite around the cell phone towers?
Well, I never have done that, but every now and then I'll find something on social media where people are making tower busters, and I'm assuming that they're doing the same thing. They're going to cell phone towers or places that emit high levels of Wi-Fi. Or that kind of energy or frequencies, and placing them around there for sure.
Yeah, it almost feels like it was the cell phones and all the research around radiation or the EMF and all of our electronics that almost gave Organite a new life again.
For sure.
I had not heard about it prior to this concept of doing some of the stuff with EMF and the cell phone towers, but it's actually been around a while.
Yes, it has, for sure.
Yeah. So who is it that started or kind of concept?
Well, I know the idea of using, say, the various layers of organic and inorganic matter is based off I believe it's William Reich's work. I'm not sure if that's how you say his last name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, William Reich.
With the Orgone generator, where he would take layers of various materials like wool, like a metal screen, and he would layer it, and he would create like a little box that you would go in, and it would block out any kind of like EMFs going into it, and it would put you into like this I'm going to say like a neutral zone where your body is not experiencing or being affected by the EMFs. Now, I have read later on, many years later, I'm not sure exactly how many, I have to search that again, but an individual came along, and based off that original work of William Reich, he took the idea and added piezoelectrical crystals and like shavings, like metal shavings of whatever kinds, and mixed it into a resin, and then started selling it that way as Orgonite.
Yeah, and I was reading that actually the resin, because it shrinks
Yes.
when it dries, that it actually creates an aspect of compression
Yep.
that amplifies or creates a different level of connection within the quartz crystals that are in all Orgonite.
Yes, that's correct. That's what gives Orgonite life, you could say, is when the resin cures and it compresses against the materials that are inside of it. That causes that energetic response.
That's fascinating. Like, we take something that you would think of as kind of, I don't know, I think of it as a toxic material with resin,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
it's a clear, because it is clear, it doesn't disrupt the energy. And yet, because it creates this pressure in our physical 3D world, it actually creates more power in the Orgonite.
Yep.
I
It's
had never heard that before. That's pretty interesting.
I've also been playing around with the Casimir effect as well. It's which is to kind of pull the definition from my memory. It's like if you take two plates and press them right up against each other, but they're not actually touching, there's an outward force that is then created, and it creates an energetic effect. So with resin, with the Orgonite, that is, you can kind of create the same thing with resin, or expect the same thing with the resin. If you're using, say, like sheets of mica, for example, you place the little sheets of mica inside of it, the resin's between it, and you press them together, it's going to cure and compress, but the mica is not actually touching each other. And then the Casimir effect I'm still working on experimenting with it more, but then that is the basis of the Casimir effect as well.
Well, and that makes sense because it's that aspect of how Orgonite, it amplifies an aspect of energy, right? It creates alignment and clarity because of the structure of what you put into the Orgonite, and then that amplification of energy. That's why you can take a pyramid and it doesn't have to be that big, and it can balance an entire room. Like, it's pretty amazing.
Absolutely.
One of the things is I was looking up when Orgonite was invented, because I'm always fascinated by the energy of things, but also a bit by the history, right? And so you mentioned William Reich, and it was actually in the 1930s. And then, of course, I kind of feel Ascended Master Saint Germain being like, yeah, that's when the I Am discourses were channeled as well, right? When they were written in the 30s. And I think about what was going on in our world in the 30s. And that was, that's 90 years ago. That's almost 100 years ago. There was such a shift with the war and the depression and everything coming out of that time that, like, I think back and I'm like, were my grandparents? What connections? Because there was only a little over 1 billion people on the planet, not the 8 billion that are here now almost. And what connections do I have that were connected into these new age things that were back in the early 1900s? Because we think and I think of history in the 1900s, what's portrayed as this, at least in the US, there's an aspect of this difficult time, right? And settling and all of those things, and in Canada for sure, where you are. And yet there's this incredible aspect of spirituality and somebody working on an Orgone energy device in the 1930s. Really? Like, you think that's technology that would be now, not that it was back then, so to speak.
100 years ago, yeah, for sure.
It was the ancient times. So, but it is pretty fun to just ponder that, like, these conversations and these people that were doing this kind of research almost 100 years ago. Like, that's so cool, because there was not, like, my dad didn't have electricity in his house in the 40s. You have people looking at energy and Orgone devices. Like, that's amazing to me. It's just amazing. So one of the things when we talk about energy devices that I always find, like, I want to know, how can I prove that it works? Like, have you done anything to try and prove this concept of, or test this concept of, is it really balancing energy, or how can I see what it's doing?
Well, for myself, I'm fairly energy sensitive, so that is where I draw a lot of my conclusions from. And I've also experimented a lot with different ways of making it. Like a lot of people are very strict to it has to be in layers. But then if you look at, say, a tower buster, for example, there are no layers. There's, a handful of shavings and a quartz crystal. There's no layers involved with that, but it still works. And I've definitely experimented with both layers and not layers. There's still an energy. Again, if you use the proper ingredients, you got to use a resin, and you have to use piezoelectrical crystals and metals for it to work. Those are the ingredients right there for a successful piece of Orgonite. But I find that I would like to get a Kirlian camera one day so I can take before and after photos. I've seen other people with before and after photos, like for example that individual whom I first got a pendant from. He had before and after photos of himself wearing a pendant, wearing one of his own pendants before with a Kirlian camera, like the actual aura photography, not the one that you stick your hand on and it reads your bioelectrical field. Again, same thing, but I mean like the actual like Polaroid photo. And he had before and after photos, and I've seen some of those. I would like to personally get a Kirlian camera so I can take those photos as a way of showing people, giving people who are less energy sensitive or not energy sensitive a mode to see there's some kind of proof. You can use dowsing rods or like a pendulum, something like that, which is something that I actually plan on doing. I have dowsing rods, and I'm going to make some videos where I can physically show somebody the area of effect of, say, a pendant or a pyramid or something like that. But another way you can look into it more to see about changes is for people who are very much self-aware of, like, say, their moods and their emotions, and that get a good idea of how you feel before wearing a piece, or say in a room or whatever, and then start wearing a pendant and pay attention to how you feel afterwards. And don't overthink it, but just say, hey, I started wearing this pendant and I'm really been having some great days. My mood seems higher. I can think better, et cetera, et cetera. My emotions seem more calmer. That can be used as a barometer for it having an effect on you.
Yes. Sometimes it's so hard because we try to analyze how we feel, and then we're like, is that really helping or not helping?
Yeah. It's like if you start eating a new food or whatever, and then you monitor how you're feeling the next few days or a week afterwards, is a good way of gauging how your body's reacting to that food. Kind of the same idea.
Yeah, and don't I remember I remember you doing something with ice. What were you doing with ice?
Oh yes, the freeze test. So the idea behind the freeze test is that if you take a regular glass, let's say a glass of water, and you freeze it, and you look at the way the water forms without Orgonite, and then you take a glass of water and you place a piece of Orgonite, say, on top of it, underneath it, or inside of it, you can noticeably see, providing the Orgonite is made correctly, you can see the ice will freeze differently, and you'll see like stalactites that are forming within the ice, and all kind. Like, again, another thing people can Google search and check, say on YouTube, for example, to see videos of it. And I have some videos of my own on my social media links on YouTube or on my Instagram. Where you can see the ice has clearly formed in a way that ice doesn't normally form without Organite present.
Yeah, that makes me want to do it. I want to put some cups of ice in with the devices I have, and I want to see
try it out.
What direction, because you could probably see the direction of the energy in a spiral as well.
You can see how how I was describing before, how the Organite pulls in energy and then pushes it out. I've had pendants where you can clearly see the stalactites have formed in a way that are sucking into the bottom of a pyramid and are mushrooming out the top.
That's amazing. Yeah. As somebody the geek in me that really likes computers and solving problems loves to bring that to spirituality. How do we prove?
Yes,
I'm reminded as we're talking, which I might have to find somebody else to have a conversation about this is Dr. Emoto's work with water, right? And how
Absolutely.
he did all of the work with messages in water. And
Yep.
when you can see in ice this concept of, he would show the ice crystals, but when we talk about Orgonite and being able to, like, ice gives us a visual of something that makes it more real if you're not super sensitive to energy. And it helps, it gives the mind this aspect of evidence, right? The mind likes evidence that we can see and hear. And that's really cool.
For sure. And I've also found I've experimented with using distilled water. So what I'll do is I'll put it in I have a copper pitcher. I drink a lot of copper water. I'll soak it overnight in the copper pitcher, distilled water, and then I'll restructure it. And then I'll use that for my freeze test. And I have found, maybe it's just a coincidence, but I have actually found I get better freeze test results with water that's been restructured and distilled water than what I do just regular tap water.
Well, and that would make sense because you're not dealing with the pollutants in tap water. And,
absolutely.
If you've energized it in copper, you've got an aspect of copper energy, which is a metal that's going to amplify that freeze test.
It's a conductor as well. So that was my idea behind it. The copper, whatever little bits get soaked into the water, it will help act as a conductor so I can better see what's going on.
I also wonder, I've never bought one, but I've always been tempted to, the EMF device, the things you can measure the EMF radiation of. I know there's research out there that people have done around measuring. I was looking at some of the stuff of, there's actually paint now that you can paint a room with that blocks EMF so that you can.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Have bedroom, and they did tests with this EMF radiation devices, and I'm like, wow, you don't realize how in a house, right? In today's world where you have the electrical meters that nobody comes and reads. They have devices in them that are emitting really high EMF, not from the electricity, but from what's connecting back, to central electrical land, telling them how much energy you've used, right? And so there's EMF everywhere. It's in our TVs, it's in our microwaves, our refrigerators, anything that's plugged in. And then, now we have smart refrigerators and smart microwaves and smart stove, everything in your house, you can connect to your Wi-Fi network, which there's good and bad with that. But whether you connect it or not, it's still emitting a signal.
It's there. And that's another great place that you can put Orgonite as well, as in your fridge. I have a little pyramid on the bottom of my fridge. One for the aspects of pyramidology, but then also the harmonizing aspects of the Orgonite around my food that I'm going to consume and put into my body. Because that's another thing too that I try to be very aware of, is keeping the energies of my food clear and at a higher vibrating state, because I'm consuming that and that's going into my body to support my body. So I want it to be, as clean as I can make it.
I love that. Why? I mean, I have a charging plate that I often set our fruit on or other stuff on the counter, but holy cow, everybody should have a pyramid in their refrigerator. That's brilliant.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I have noticed a change too in the quality of my food, and even the ability for food to stay longer, to stay fresh longer.
Right. Well, yeah, because if you balance the energy, even though the food still has energy.
Yep.
Even though it's not as much energy as, when it was on the plant, there's still an aspect of energy in that food, and then we're going to consume it. So just clearing the energy of all the processing and whatever it's gone through.
Yep. And even just human energy handling it too. That's another thing too. You're consuming that too.
Okay. Maybe you need to have, refrigerator pyramids. You should do something fun with refrigerator pyramids. Holy cow, I love it. So that's awesome. The other thing that popped in that I was thinking about ways to measure it, I have done learned a lot more about thermography in the past couple of years. I had met a naturopath several years ago that was a client.
Okay.
And she had somebody that would come in and do the thermography scan. It was particularly for, detection of cancer, because your energy field and the heat in your body is different. I wonder what a thermography scan would look like if you just took an image and then wore a Orgonite pendant for an hour and took another image, right? Like
That's a great idea.
that could be an interesting way to see if energy aligns, if it looks like it's, moving better. I don't know. That's just kind of
That's a great idea. I should look into
connection. The thermography, there's a lot more people that do that. It might be more accessible. Be sure to listen to the rest of Brad and I's conversation next week as we talk about the ingredients of Organite and what makes Brad's Organite unique. You can find Brad at bluefirealchemy.com. The links are in all the podcast descriptions. So check out his work and what he has available on his website. You've just listened to the Spiritual Geek Podcast. Thanks for joining us. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to share a comment and a rating on your favorite podcast platform. If you were inspired, consider sharing with friends and family. Love and light to you, and may your day be filled with joy and wisdom as you consciously create your life.